Welcome to the Red Planet, comrade. Welcome to the Big Puzzle. In this podcast, we explore the subtle connections between science, religion, politics, economics, and history. One piece at a time, we unveil the big picture of this shared experience that we call life. In the last long episode, we talked a lot about how difficult it is to leave the planet and travel through space. Let's talk a little more about that. So in that episode, we talk about orbital velocity and escape velocity. And based on that, it seems like you need to achieve escape velocity in order to be able to go anywhere else. That's not completely true because the Earth is not the only object in the universe. So you can use the gravity of other objects, particularly the sun, to help you travel through space. So this is how it will work. You can go into orbital velocity and start orbiting around the Earth, and then you can jump into another orbit. You need to put some energy, but it's not the energy that you need to achieve escape velocity. It's less than that. It's significantly less than that. You can go into another orbit that eventually would intercept the orbit of Mars, right? So that's how you can travel. That is called the Hoffman transfer orbit. And yeah, it's very interesting calculations that we're not be going to discussing here. But yeah, it's possible to travel cheaper. So what is the catch then? Well, the catch is that for that to work, the two planets have to be at certain particular regions of their orbit. Right? So if the Earth and Mars are complete opposite sides of the sun, then it's very difficult. Well, it's not difficult. It's basically impossible to use that method to go from Mars to Earth, from Earth to Mars, and also from Mars to Earth. And that alignment of the planets only happens every 26 months, so a little over 2 years. What that means is that you can only plan on sending rockets from Earth to Mars every 2 years, let's say. And also that trip is rather slow. You end up taking, I think it's between 8 and 9 months of traveling through space at zero gravity to get from Earth to Mars. So think about that. Anything that you want to send to Mars has to go through that process. Now, one interesting thing about calculation, when you're doing some calculations in physics, sometimes you're surprised. So for me, one of the surprises was to learn that the energy that you need to achieve orbital velocity is exactly the half the energy you need to achieve escape velocity. In other words, you can go to orbit with half the energy, and then the other half the energy you need to go to escape velocity. So, well, as we mentioned, we don't really need to go to escape velocity, but still you need to get some other boost. So the plan that is being proposed is that you could put a lot of the fuel that you need to go to Mars into orbit. So you will sending rockets whose payload would be fuel, and those will be just orbiting around the Earth. And then when you want to go to Mars, you just send a rocket that goes into orbit. So it only needs the fuel only. You need the fuel to get to orbit, and then you will be refueling. So you'll be connecting to several of those rockets that are in orbit, and then with that extra energy, you can go to Mars. Well, there's several problems with that. First of all, that you use a lot of fuel just to take a little payload of fuel in orbit. waiting there. Those fuel transfers were never done, so we don't know how difficult would it be. But also, once you get into orbit, you're committed to that orbit. In the movies we see, rockets changing directions, going up and down. Well, that's not how it works. Once you go into orbit, you're pretty much stuck to it. If you want to change direction, or if you're going to go into a different orbit, you need to add energy. Or in other words, you need to use fuel. So you would be in orbit chasing and trying to connect to the orbit of all these other tanks of fuel. And then after you finish refueling several times, you have to wait for 8 months traveling without gravity and reaching to Mars. There's no plan B if anything fails. There's no way to come back. There's no other place that you could go. Even planes, when they plan their routes from one place to another, they try to follow paths that they have airports that they could use if anything happens. Right? So that's why some routes are more risky than others. But basically, especially, it depends on the number of turbines that they have, how much risk they can take. But yeah, if you see they don't go straight from one place to another most of the time, they basically follow some routes that they know, well, if the engines fail, they could land in this or that other airports. Well, that doesn't happen on a route to Mars. Anything that happens there, you're doomed. There's no plan B. There's no enough fuel to stop the rocket and come back or anything like that. So those are some considerations about the logistics, but there is more. Using this convoluted method of refueling in orbit and going every 26 months and so on, how much payload can each rocket take? And SpaceX, let's say Elon Musk, says that they could send 100 tons. And looks like a lot until you realize that that's basically 2.5 18-wheelers. It's not that much. If you're going to establish whatever, you need hundreds and hundreds of rockets to get there. And again, once you get to Mars, you need to hopefully want to come back. I mean, if you're saying that the rocket is reusable, well, you need to be able to reuse it. But there's no infrastructure at all to receive the rocket and to come back. I don't know if you remember, but when one of the first tests with spaceship, was even by having this high launch pad, still the rocket engines threw a lot of rocks into the air. Some of them damaged the actual engines of the rocket, and that's how it failed. And they had to do a lot of things. And that's kind of, I don't know what was the elevation of that platform, the launch pad, but you don't have that. So the rocket would be just on the ground in Mars. So I don't know how they're planning to, send it back. Even though admittedly you would need less energy because there's 1/3 of the gravity there, but still, I don't see that you could launch a rocket in Mars back to Earth without infrastructure. And how are you going to take that infrastructure there? How are you going to build it? Only by 3 18-wheelers per rocket. It's very, very difficult, right? So also, whatever you want to do there, you need energy. So you need to have some kind of generation, solar power, wind power, atomic power, whatever it is, you need to send it there, right? And in order to do that, you need to have some way to manage that. So you need some vehicles, some trucks, some machinery, some tools. So it's kind of chicken and the egg problem. What do you send first to Mars? So again, and having all those rockets that land there until you can prepare them to hopefully send them back, just piling up. You have hundreds of rockets just sitting on the surface of Mars, waiting for you to be able to create the basic infrastructure to send them back. You can only send them back every 2 years, and the window is rather small, so just a few weeks that you can use to send them back, because if not, it doesn't make sense energetically, because you can't achieve that transfer orbit. And so, as you can see, it's really, really a mess. They claim that they can generate fuel, methane, basically, and oxygen in Mars. And it's true that apparently there's water. The problem is that the water is under the surface and 20 kilometers under the surface. I think that the farthest that we drilled in Earth, I can't remember exactly, someplace in Russia, I can remember it was 11 kilometers. So even in Earth, we never reached those depths. And then you need very heavy drilling equipment just to get the water, and then to be able to, I don't know if it's in liquid form, but you need to somehow extract it, pump it up, store it, process it. We already talked about turning carbon dioxide into methane, how difficult, how energy intensive it is. So even if it would be technically possible, it will be logistically really impossible. There's no way. So again, chicken and egg problem. How do you send all the equipment that you need, to be able to produce the fuel in situ to send the rockets back? But let's say that somehow through sheer willpower, we overcome all those technical problems. There's still the last and the most important, and all these other videos were basically just an introduction to this one. So this is the last nail in the Mars colony coffin. Is the economy. Who is going to pay for all of this? So you will have 1 million people living in Mars in conditions that are awful, living underground, exposed to radiation, to decaying of the bodies because of the lack of full gravity. So they most likely will be forced to exercise every day, or they would die, exposed to famine very easily, to infinite possible catastrophes, not having enough sun, not having anything that is enjoyable. So it will be worse than the worst jail in Earth. Who would want to be there? But what will they be doing? How are we going to be paying for all the things that Earth is constantly sending them for them to survive, to barely survive under those awful conditions? They don't have an economy. They don't have anything in Mars that they could use to pay us, who will remain in Earth, back. So who's going to be paying for the rockets? Who's going to be paying for the payload? And are you willing to spend half of your paycheck to maintain a colony in Mars? A colony of people who hate to be there? And if you say, well, yeah, it's an investment that we have to do because we have to become interplanetary, and yeah, it's so critical that we live in a... Well, but if anything happened in Earth, these guys are 100% dependent on Earth. So if you, hopefully, I don't know, 1 year later or 2 years later, if something happened to Earth, the same fate will be expected to happen in Mars. They will just die horrible deaths. So Yeah, the economy is really the problem. That's another thing that we sometimes don't realize, how tailor-made we are, not only as humans, as individuals to our planet, but also as a society. Society developed around trade, around an economy, and that economy has to do with the natural resources that we have and how we process them and how we trade with each other, how we specialize. If you don't have that, you don't have a society, and there's no way to survive. Again, let's try to be very optimistic. Say, okay, well, but maybe they can become self-reliant. I mean, one advantage that they have there is that iron is everywhere. That's why it's the red planet, right? Because of the amount of iron that they have. Well, one problem, the iron ore is basically oxidized iron. And we already talked about how much carbon likes oxygen. Well, the same thing happens with iron. It's very difficult to separate them. It's very difficult to extract. I mean, not technically difficult, but it's very energetically intensive. If you've ever seen a steel mill, well, you've seen it's all about heat. It's all about this huge machinery. And remember, no combustion there. How are you going to send all that equipment just to create a steel mill there? Because basically, I would say, as a construction engineer, that steel is basically what you need the most to build a city, right? There's no carbon easily available. Again, unless you use a lot of energy to extract it from the atmosphere. So, yeah, turning the iron into steel will be a challenge. Also, there's no cement, there's no plastic, there's no wood. But you cannot build a society. You cannot build an economy in Mars, and that is pretty much the end of it. Right? That's something that we will not be able to solve ever. So why is Elon Musk insisting on this? And it's one of those rare occasions in which he actually gives a hint of what he's trying to do. So it's very off character of him, but I found this post from him. It says, even if we fail at creating a Mars colony that can grow without continuous support from Earth, the absurdly ambitious nature of the goal nonetheless results in the creation of alien-level technology that is crushingly better than competitors who merely aim for Earth orbit. Yeah, that's kind of true. So the space race, even though it was kind of useless, was mostly political in nature. Yeah, it created a lot of technology that now it's very useful. But the science of rocketry and space exploration is reaching diminishing returns, right? So you spend a lot of money to get marginal gains, and I don't think that's the best use of our money. Like I mentioned before, if we are going to live in another planet, there has to be some breakthrough in science, something that is so huge that we can, start doing things differently. And that could happen. It did happen in the past. That's where we are today, thanks to those breakthroughs. I don't know, discovering how to produce anti-gravity. Like I mentioned before also, if we can discover how to create wormholes to connect different parts of the universe. So that kind of thing, if we discover how to do those things, well, maybe then we can start thinking about doing this. But if anything, we should be investing in that, not in refining rockets that are not the solution, and will never be. Yeah, we can still learn some stuff. There could be some interesting discoveries that are useful in some other domains, but it's not really something that will take us to the next level as a species. So again, we are tailor-made for this earth, or this earth is tailor-made for us. As individuals, as a society, we need to do the best that we can with what we have. We need to be, dream big, but also be realistic. It's very easy to shoot ourselves in the foot if we don't do that. And sometimes I feel we are going in that direction. So the homework is always the same. Be nice to this planet. Be nice to the other life that we are sharing this planet with. Try to see how you can contribute, how you can make things better, and be mindful about all these things. And yeah, we need to extend our existence here. So let's make sure that we have it as comfortable as we can. So with this, I'm planning to wrap up this series on Mars. There's definitely other things that we could be talking about. I think it would be interesting. If you guys leave some comments, I might address them like I did with very short videos, trying to answer them. If anything that I said is wrong, let me know. Again, I'm not claiming to have all the truth, but yeah, it's. I hope this creates some debate and we can all learn from that. If you like this video, as always, like it formally by clicking the button, share it with other people, and yeah, subscribe to this channel if you want. I'm also planning to start putting some of this in Spotify. So if you're used to that platform instead, or you just want to listen to it, it will be there as well. So more news on that soon. So with that, we'll hope to see you in the next one when we place another piece of the big puzzle. Bye.